На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. While we record just before CSKA plays Wolfsburg in Austria, we've got 3 Champions League games to cover and some quick kicks of recent and upcoming RPL action too. Joining me this week once again is Richard Pike.
Good evening, everybody. How are we all?
I'm not too bad because this time we've got back again the host of whatever this is and the one-word tweet aficionado, Hanu Trivedi.
Hi guys, hi James, hi Richard. Thanks for the introduction, James. As of late, I've been typing more paragraphs than words because of how terrible the teams I support are. But I'll be back to the one words very soon, hopefully.
Yeah, and as those who are listening out now can hear, is in the title, of course, this week is Zenit versus Zenit. Are they possibly frauds or not? And we'll get onto that a little bit later and discussing teams that Hanu supports who are not doing the best right now. But if we're on little brighter pastures, we'll start off with the most recent of these 3 European midweek games, as Lokomotiv Moscow travelled to Salzburg and picked up a very respectable shock 2-2 draw with Red Bull Salzburg themselves. Now, to quickly run through the game first, Loko took a surprise lead through the most unlikely of sources, as the whatever this is Hall of Meme inductee Eder actually managed to get a header on target for once and somehow scored. Now, they were pegged back just before half-time thanks to a wonderful equaliser from Dominik Szoboszlai. Then, regular service resumed within 5 minutes, as former Bremen man Zlatko Junuzovic got on the end of a great Patson Daka pass and put Red Bull ahead. Loko, however, did not give up, and a goal 15 minutes from time from the impressive Vitaly Lisakovic levelled affairs. Now, the fake team energy drink advert football club may not be one of the elite names in the groups, but they are one of the most lethal pot 3 sides to draw, and are both quite talented young sides and effective, very efficiently ran football club. So this is an excellent away point for Loko, and there's no doubting that. Now, I personally predicted a 2-0 victory for Salzburg in my preview that's on the site, and I must admit I'm pretty happy to be proven so wrong. Hanu, what's your take on the game? So are you surprised by Eder scoring?
I mean, of course, I am surprised by their scoring, but I think, like you and like almost everyone else in the Russian football community, I feel like I was perhaps too harsh on Lokomotiv and their chances because on the podcast, on our podcast, on your podcast, we've basically been incessantly memeing Lokomotiv about how they're going to finish with 0 points, concede 35 goals and stuff like that. But I think I have to apologize and say that Nikolic, now I've been saying this before, and I've said it a lot, is that Nikolic is better than Semen for Lokomotiv in the current day. And I think that despite their squad not being the best, I think, yeah, they've got Eder and Kiknadze is a bit of a meme, but I have to say, and to hold my hands up, I feel like on the pitch at least they are doing a lot of things right. Of course, I didn't expect Eder to score. I mean, he does have a bit of a penchant for scoring important goals, so I guess fair play to him. But it is a huge point for Lokomotiv, and I think credit to them. I saw a couple of sequences, couple of clips on Twitter where they really seemed like a Champions League side, a respectable Champions League team. And I hope they can keep that up. I hope they can. I still think they'll finish last, but I mean that's just because of how tough the group is. But if they can be respectable against the bigger teams, if they can not get battered, and if they can show some more strong-willed performances like this, then I think they have every right to be proud of themselves.
Yeah, certainly. I echo that entirely. That it's the pride that is the real redeeming factor out of this, and it's more so a discussion on how good the other teams are that they would be so happy to get a point away to Red Bull Salzburg. I don't mean that by any disrespect to either side, but the 3 teams that are in the group are just a class above Lokomotiv right now, and to get anything from this is a success. Now, we all did write them off, and I think rightfully so. Everybody wrote them off, but maybe because of that, there is zero pressure on Loko. They can go out there. They've lost the best player in the summer. They lost a legendary manager, rightly or wrongly. He was a legend in the eyes of the fans. The fans are very angry at the time. So they were feeling pretty rock bottom for a while, despite performing relatively well. I mean, with the 1-4 in a row domestically. So there's absolutely zero pressure on this UCL performance. So, Richard, on the back of that, do you see Loko potentially pulling off some more shocks, or was this a little bit of an outlier?
I mean, in terms of being an outlying result, possibly. However, in Lokomotiv's defence, that display has given me and everybody else at RFN and in the Russian English language Russian football community and in Russia themselves as well, some more hope than before for them. I mean, I still expect, like Hanu, I still expect them to finish bottom of the group. However, I thought the game against Salzburg, I watched the second half of it and I caught some highlights of all the game just recently, and I thought that in that game it was a performance of real character from them. They were disciplined, didn't panic when going behind, and as you both said, as you said, they were unlucky with the second goal, which was a deflection. And then there's nothing they can do about the first goal too. It was a complete worldie from Sobsalai. But and I agree with Hanu here. I believe Marko Nikolic deserves a lot of credit personally. In my opinion, he's getting the most out of this group of players than any other manager of any top Russian team at this moment in time. Let's not forget he's had it really rough since taking over. He's had to replace a club legend like Sumin, as you were just saying, James. And then he loses his star man, Alexei Miranchuk. And I mean, to add a third complication on top of those two things, he also loses one of his other really top players in Dmitry Barinov to an ACL injury. He's not going to come back till March. But overall, he's knuckled down really well, got on with things, not complained, and is now getting the most out of this squad of players, which he possibly can. And it's a limited set, but he's getting the most out of them. The next game's a bit of an eye-opener, isn't it, against Bayern Munich at home?
Yeah.
They're probably going to have to, never mind park a bus, park a truck in front of goal and try and get a point somehow. But no, it was pleasantly surprising against Salzburg. They hung in well. Salzburg had a few good chances, but not as many really clear-cut ones I was expecting them to carve out. I thought Loko kept their attacking threats in check pretty well. And a good game by Guilherme, which, is a bit of a surprise given that he's not exactly our cup of tea at RFN. But no, a pleasantly surprising result. And it does actually give Loko a very slight chance of finishing third in this absolutely wicked Champions League group. I mean, I still think they'll come bottom, but at least the performance was an honourable one, let's just say.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, Richard, Daniil Kulikov, you mentioned Dima Barinov, who's, of course, out with the ACL injury, and he picked that up in the Spartak match when things started to get a little bit rocky for Nikolic and for Loko after such a good start. Now, he obviously was out on Wednesday night, and Daniil Kulikov, 22-year-old defence midfielder, took his place, and I think Kulikov deserves quite a lot of credit for his performance. He was matured. He obviously had quite a limited job of just limiting the opposition, getting the ball to Krakowiak. It wasn't much more beyond that, but he did perform out of that. He performed better than that, and he's only got 7 starts in his entire senior career since making the jump up from Lokomotiv's farm team, Loko Kazanka. So I think Kulikov can be very enthused by his performance on what is his European debut. And another man whom I must admit I am loath to say this, but Guilherme had a very solid game between the sticks. Now, in my preview, I actually mentioned that I think he could be a key player in that fixture. Obviously, he's a goalkeeper, but he's more likely to make a costly error and a massive cock-up than he is to pull off a worldly save. Now, he pulled off 7 saves, and to be fair, he could do, like you said, Richard, he could do very little about Sobolai's brilliant equaliser or the deflection for the second. So, Hanu, do you rate the nationalised Russian? Or, like me, do you think he's the most overrated goalkeeper in the RPL?
I feel like I don't have much of an opinion on Guilherme. Honestly, I don't know of many people that rate Guilherme as. I think people have just come to terms with the fact that he's a naturalized guy. He plays for Lokomotiv, and he's just he's a player that doesn't strike or that doesn't fill anybody with excitement. He's not a player that he's not the best goalkeeper in the league. He's far from it, and I think. Credit to him for this performance. I think it's a good performance. I don't think it changes my perception of Guilherme by much. I think he's still a solid goalkeeper. Nothing to rave about too much. Nothing to not a player that should be criticized day in day out. I think he's a decent enough player, and I think you have to give him credit for his good performances. And like you said, the Salzburg game was one of them. So I think fair play to him for pulling off 7 saves. It was probably one of the better performances of any local player on there, maybe along with Lisakovic and what's his name, Anton Miranchuk. So yeah, I mean, fair play to Guilherme.
Yeah, I really liked Miranchuk's performance. He actually picked up Loko's September Player of the Month, and he didn't actually score at all during September when a lot of players, I think they had 6 different goal scorers in 5 games, all stepping in for Miranchuk's departure, and Anton wasn't one of them players, but in every single match he was the creative fulcrum. He was the one that drove them forward. He's moved in from the wing into a central attacking midfield role and stepped out of his brother's shadow somewhat. And I actually feel sorry for Antoshka because right now you can't mention how well he's playing without the caveat of Lyosha leaving and so on. But if he keeps continuing performing to the level that he is, it'll only be so long where you can finally separate the two, just like they have been physically separated. Richard, who else stood out for you in the game?
I thought, based on what I watched, I was really impressed with the way Lisakovic came on in the second half, and I felt he did really well when he came on. He wasn't the best goalkeeper from the Salzburg keeper for Loko's equaliser, but he was there and he took his chance. I also quite liked the little cameo from Kamano. I thought there's a couple of times when he was beating the right back of Salzburg, taking him on a few times. I'd like to see. I know Nikolic said in his post-match press conference that Kamano's still not fully fit, but I hope when they get him fit, they can find the form that he was showing at Bordeaux 2-3 seasons ago. Because like I say, 3 seasons ago, he was being linked with Liverpool and Arsenal, Kamano, 2-3 seasons ago. So they can find that form. He could be a real asset for them. On the wings, they've got some good players with Chinsky, a few others. Hopefully they can integrate Zeloish into the squad soon. Felt the defence held firm well. Guillaume had one of his better games. The defence held firm too. And like you were saying, about Kulikov, he's not had many starts. But alongside Madkeyev now, Stanislav Madkeyev, they've got another decent young defensive midfield player there. So there's options now for Loko and Nikolic too. And Lisakovic made an impression on me. Felt he played well, and to echo your thoughts, Anton Miranchuk too. Some promising signs for them.
Yeah, so if we move on, next up we're going to be travelling to France, and where Krasnodar themselves did with a severely depleted squad and backroom staff. First of all, Murad Masayev stayed in Russia to deal with an angina problem. Captain Alexander Martinovic, Victor Claesson and Wanderson were all injured, while Remy Cabella had undergone an inconclusive COVID test and was thus quarantined. New signings Alexei Ianov and Yevgeny Markov were included in the squad list for Europe, with Markov himself also having an inconclusive test anyway. And thus the Bulls started with 4 fullbacks on the pitch as Christian Ramirez stepped up into left wing and Igor Smolnikov on the right. And then, of course, Sergei Petrov, as ever, played right back, while new signing Yevgeny Chernov made his European debut at left back. And Krasnodar were under the cosh for most of the game, I think it'd be fair to say. Ren played some excellent stuff, led by 17-year-old star prospect Eduardo Camavinga. But Christopher Olsen was influential in a deep-lying role. He really controlled the game nicely for Krasnodar, and I think he's getting better and better in that deepest role in the Krasnodar team that you used to see Gazinski play week in, week out. Olsen's got the nod over Gazinski and has made it his own. And while the defence generally looked very solid, they went in the break level. However, on the 56th minute, Kayo and Yego Sorokin had another one of those moments in the box, as they both made a combination of errors, and the former took down Martin Terrier and gave away a penalty, which was duly dispatched by Sertu Girassi. But then, just a minute later, Tony Vilhena released Ramirez, who levelled the tie. Krasnodar then went on to soak up even more pressure and sat back for large swathes of the game, with Matvey Safanov making a series of brilliant saves in what was a man-of-the-match performance. And in the end, they drew 1-1, which is thanks to the aforementioned Safanov and putting in a brilliant performance, as he and Sergei Petrov look to have picked up injuries in what could be a little bit of a Pyrrhic, but well-deserved and solid point. So Richard first this time. Safanov's got to be the man to discuss here. What did you think of his performance?
Indeed, James, yes. I thought he handled the pressure of a big game like that really, really well. You know, it was difficult circumstances, as we said, with all the injuries and players missing for Krasnodar, but I thought he handled that performance really well. With regards to him, it was a super performance. Very composed, did what he had to do, some good saves, and was a key component in Krasnodar's result, which, you know, was pleasantly surprising. I did say on the last pod, I was trying to put my optimistic head on and say a 1-1 draw. I said that with a bit of, let's just say, a bit of fear as well as optimism, but no, Krasnodar, you know, came out of France with a very, very good point there. And, you know, he needed to play well, Safanov, to, you know, for Krasnodar to get anything from that game. And he did just that, you know. We mentioned on past pods about him and Alexander Maximenko from Spartak being promising, yet having mistakes in them. However, both of them this season, I think, are really, you know, ironing out those mistakes now. And Russia's number one goalkeeping spot is now in very good hands going forward, in my opinion. So yeah, I thought he was a crucial component in Krasnodar's brilliant result, and hats off to him.
What's so good about Safanov is that his maturity just belies his years. He looks really like a player who's performing well beyond his what is in reality a tender age. Now, talking about players who are mature beyond their years, Hanu, this is the first time that a lot of us in the Russian football community may have perhaps seen young Kamavinga in earnest, the Rennes starlet who's only 17, and God, he's an absolute baller. What did you think of his performance, Hanu?
Well, it was quite interesting for me to get to see Kamavinga because Real Madrid have actually been very heavily linked to him. This is probably a fun fact for most of you guys, but there were only two clubs in Europe's top five leagues that did not spend a single penny and did not sign a single player. Those were Real Madrid and Valencia. And basically, what we've been told,
Oh,
what the
well.
fans have been told, that next summer we're going to sign Kamavinga, Mbappe, and a couple of other players. So it'll be very disappointing if we don't sign him. And looking at his performance, I think he would be phenomenal. At the age of 17, he's good. He's great defensively. He's wise beyond his years. He's got good positioning. He can create play. He was basically running the whole show. And I think
Hmm.
taking all of that into account, taking Rennes squad into account, it's also huge for Krasnodar to actually get a draw, playing with four fullbacks, not having any of their major attackers except for Marcus Berg. And I mean, Kamavinga is this phenomenal player. It's very rare for a player that young to be. We've seen, of course, we've seen players be this young and turn out into nothing and not go very far. But I think this guy, he's got a different, just got a different vibe to him, and I think he will be at the very top quite soon.
Yeah, certainly. He's just got that air of confidence that around him, which really impresses me for somebody who's so young and has got such little genuine first level experience. I mean, he has been playing for a while now, considering he's only 17. But his ability, his ball retention ability, his ability to just get out of spaces and find a teammate. He had a 95% pass accuracy rate against Krasnodar. He was just unbelievable. I don't want to hype him up too much, but it's been a while since I've seen somebody so young be so composed and just, like I say, belie the experience and that's on his shoulders. It's so good to see. And unfortunately, it came against Krasnodar. So, Richards, Krasnodar will likely have Remy Cabella back for the next group game, which is at home to Chelsea. But there could still very well be without Klaassen, Wanderson, and now Safanov and Petrov as injuries basically mount more and more. Now, Safanov's injury reportedly came from near the end of the game, in which he pulled off an excellent double save. And you can see he goes down awkwardly on his shoulder, and there is quite a worry around the extent of that injury. And it's the Teflon nature of this Krasnodar squad comes back to bite them for the fourth time this season in the Champions League football, and for the second year in a row. So, do you think they can cope with this, with what's quite a small squad?
Well, I mean, having Cabella back, I think, is a good plus. You should definitely help them maintain possession well against Chelsea, and let's face it, they're gonna have to be able to do that because you know Chelsea's attack is on paper, you know, ridiculously good. You know, if they click, Havertz, Pulisic, Werner, and Mount, you know, they really could run riot against Krasnodar's defence. That's what I'm really worried about going into that game. Um, I think they'll probably try and play a little bit more cautiously against Chelsea due to this, and obviously, as we've been saying with the injuries and whatnot. The key will be keeping it tight, I think, for the first 30, 35 minutes of that game. If they can keep it tight, increase the pressure on Chelsea, don't concede, then you never know. If they can just pinch a goal from somewhere. Chelsea's defence has not been great. West Brom and Southampton have both hit 3 goals against it. I'm certainly not a fan of some of their players in defence, like Kurt Zuma, for example. And, there's been a few others. Christensen's not really developed either. So, Chelsea defensively are Chelsea are kind of a double-edged sword, really. They've got a very good attack, and when it clicks, they'll destroy teams in offence. But when it comes to defensive duties, I'm not sure about them at all. So I think a point at home to Krasnodar, if Krasnodar could get it, a point at home to Chelsea would be a brilliant result for them. It will give them a chance of finishing third ahead of Rennes in the group. And personally, as you guys were saying, as you and Hanu were saying, James, with the exception of Camavinga, who, like you were saying, looks like he will be quite some player in the future. He's got a brilliant future going forward. I was actually not as impressed with Rennes as I thought I was going to be. Considering to the side that come third in Ligue 1, I really was expecting them to win that game against Krasnodar, especially with Krasnodar being depleted. So hopefully everybody will be back fit for Krasnodar's, home game against Rennes later on match day 5. Because that could decide, whether Krasnodar could edge ahead of them. I mean, I still do expect them to probably come bottom of this group like Lokomotiv, but they've got a chance, based on what I saw the other night. Good character from them. Just hopefully the injuries aren't as bad as what we're fearing, and then they can get the key players back for that Rennes game.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you do mention that Chelsea's attack is very good, but with their Fat Frank the Fraud in charge, I don't know if they're going to be too much to worry about. No, a joke, of course, a joke. That attack is quite frightening, and the key return for me would be Martinovic at the back. Martinovic, of course, is getting a bit on a bit now. He's at the wrong end of 35, coming up towards that, so his legs are starting to go. But when he plays, whoever's alongside him, they're just calmed down. He's such a calming influence, and whether it's Kayo or Sorokin, mainly Kayo, those two together have made quite a few high-profile errors this season already. And look, they're both young defenders, they're both ball-playing defenders. They will make mistakes now and again, and as they develop, as they get experience, and become towards the prime of the careers, like where Martinovic has been, then that will be rubbed out. But like you said, Richard, the sheer quality that's in that Chelsea attack, which has only been added to with players like Werner and Havertz, then I will worry if it is Sorokin and Kayo, because that mistake that they made, one mistake each, that they both made at the same time was pretty poor at this level. And if you make that at Champions League level, you will be punished for it. So, Hanu, you famously are not a big fan of Masayev. And last time you were on the podcast, you were kind of advocating meekly that he wouldn't be surprised if he was sacked, and you could see it happening. Now, and how do you think that Masayev, set his team up? Because of course he wasn't there himself. And surely, do you think Galitsky won't place too much pressure on him right now? Is qualification in the next round their main focus, considering the sides they face and the injuries that they currently have?
Well, I think I've been quite explicit about my thoughts on Musayev, and I believe that he should have been sacked, or at least should have been given last warning if Krasnodar didn't qualify for the Champions League, which they did. And I think for the time being, his job is safe, and I have no problem with it being safe, because I mean, they're not doing too well in the league, and of course, it's not going to be great if they finish outside the top 5, top 6, top 4, whatever you consider to be the benchmark. But I think they lined up pretty well. Of course, even though Musayev wasn't there, there was a degree of maturity. The game management was quite better, and even it's not easy to have a lot of your key players out and still build a team that's capable. Like, it's not easy having 4 wing backs and 2 of them are playing on the wings, and you've got a very makeshift squad. So I think credit has to be due to Musayev over there. I'm still not 100% on his abilities as a manager. But I think perhaps I'm a bit too harsh over there. But I think his job is fine, and I don't think Galitsky is looking for qualification to the next round. I think he's fine with just getting to the Champions League, and that's very fair. So I think his job is safe. I think it's safe for a fair reason, getting to the Champions League and even getting a draw in the first game against a formidable opponent, which other clubs in Russia have famously not managed to do, is good enough. And I think he deserves to have the leeway, and he deserves to have the deserves to have some more time in the job at the very least.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what I'm actually impressed by Messiah right now is, I mean, yeah, he wasn't at the match, but he is in charge. He is the one who picks the team, who does the training. This is his team. What they were doing on the pitch is his vision, and he's clearly learned from last year's difficult autumn in which they crashed out of the Champions League and then crashed out of the Europa League. And it's been a lesson for Masayev and mainly Krasnodar as a whole, from Galitsky down in the training ground. And it's off the ball where they've developed so much. Now, last year, there didn't seem to be the greatest functioning off the ball structure, where they had the usual 4-3-3 where they dominate, they press high, but Krasnodar aren't a defensively focused team domestically. There's not often that they come up against sides. I mean, apart from maybe the odd game against Zenit, where they will be absolutely dominated and be on the back foot for a long time. And I'm not saying that I mean, these are elite level players. I'm not saying that they don't know how to defend, but there is a way of going about things at this elite level. And he changed it up against Rennes. It was more of like a compact 4-4-2 in defense, where Ramirez and Smolnikov stayed narrow, stayed deep. They didn't go for the ball. They didn't go for the press. They waited and they assessed their options, whether would have to go and take control of the pass that would penetrate through the channels, or go and push on to intercept, or sit back and wait for the tackle. And I just thought it was a very mature performance with Krasnodar, of course, aided by having 4 fullbacks on the pitch. So it is naturally more defensive. But that 4-4-2 shape where it was bank of 4, very high up, another bank of 4, and then Utkin pushing right up next to Berg really stopped a lot of Rennes' play from deep. And I thought it was a massive learning curve from how they played in the UCL qualifiers last season. So Richard, what do you think about Masayev and Krasnodar's development?
Yeah, just to echo your thoughts there, James, I think they're absolutely spot on. I think it's almost a bit like, perhaps in the past we've possibly looked at Krasnodar and they probably reminded me a bit like Arsenal under Wenger sometimes. They were a bit naive defensively, perhaps off the ball, not doing as much as they should have been doing, not quite doing the right things. But then, but yeah, you're totally right. In the 2 games against PAOK and against Rennes, they've really matured in that sense, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they can carry on keeping it going both domestically and in Europe going forward. And yeah, they had to adapt. Like you said, they were playing 4 fullbacks, in that game, so they definitely had to adapt. And but yeah, nice to see some pragmatism coming in there. Obviously, you don't want to take away what they're very, very good at, which is the lovely smooth passing game that they do play when they get it going. But nice to see some pragmatism from Krasnodar. So fingers crossed that Messiah can keep learning and keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say that they had the 2 flat 4 banks of 4, it wasn't like they were retreating into defensive lines and park the bus sort of thing. They were pushed high up and pushed their opponents back. And in the first half, Rennes, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Rennes only really had 3 or 4 chances, and they were all long shots outside the box. Now, of course, Camavinga, I thought he played really well, especially for his age, but as a team, Krasnodar stifled Rennes very effectively in the first half, and that's why it stayed 0-0 at the break. And it's just such a shame that one error was what cost them the 3 points, because it could have been 3 points. So the way the Safanov was playing late on, when Krasnodar naturally tired and they started getting nervous, and then they hit the back of the mind and they were getting deeper and deeper. Well, then Safanov was just brilliant at the back as the last line of defence. So if it wasn't for that little mistake, then it could have been an even better result. And absolute hats off to Masayev and these players, because I did not see that coming, especially with the squad that was chose on the day and the issues that they do have right now. So on that bright and happy note, unfortunately, we're going to have to turn our attentions to Zenit. Now, they played Club Brugge and hosted them in St. Petersburg on Tuesday night and were pretty much heavy favourites to win. And on paper, in my opinion, should have done. But what is, in theory, never always happens in reality. And of course, to summarise the game, they started relatively brightly and I thought they were on top. Sardar Azmoun almost pounced on a spill from a mistake by Bruges' keeper. And then as the game wore on, the pace and tenacity of Bruges' play on the ball, and then the press off it caused a cacophony of problems to Zenit's midfield. They couldn't simply keep up with the runners around them, and Semak's decision to play a very narrow system isolated the fullbacks and caused a myriad of issues at the back too. In the second half, Bruges ramped up the pressure towards the end, and were even then they were unlucky not to go into the break already ahead. But they did take the lead eventually through Emmanuel Dennis. And the pace of Dennis and Diatta and Clinton Mata down the right caused all sorts of problems. And that was particularly noticeable in the performance of Daniil Krugovoy, who's made his European debut, who I thought was put out to pasture a little bit. I thought Semak's tactics left him isolated far too often. He was nowhere to be seen, and Krugovoy got dribbled past 4 times during the course of the 90 minutes, which you just simply can't let that happen 1v1 in this elite level. And that's why they conceded both goals came down from that right-hand side. And I don't want to have a go at Krugovoy too much because I think he is a talented young lad and he's going to really develop. And it was really good to see him get the nod over Zhirkov. But if it wasn't for, even the goal when Denny scored, Rakitsky made 2 fantastic goal line blocks. And there's absolutely nobody following the runner anyway, so it's not like it was just Krugovoy. There was issues beyond that. I don't want to hit on him too much. But of course, then 10 minutes later, Dejan Lovren let rip with an absolute steamroller from 30 yards out. I don't know about Khimki in a second, Hanu, but I can't remember him doing that for Liverpool ever, or Southampton. And the ball cannoned off the post, back off the head of Bruges keeper Horvath, and then into the net. It was a stroke of luck, but one that the shot itself deserved. And then in the 93rd minute, disaster struck as Zenit conceded again from the right-hand side, a terrible lapse in defence, and Charles de Catalet was basically wandered into the box just to convert from close range, totally unmarked. Zuber and Azmoun were pretty poor up top and nothing could stick, and Zenit's big chances largely came from long shots. For me, though, this loss is on Sergei Semak. The book stops with him. Hanu, what did you think of Semak's approach to the game? And do you agree with some of the calls that we've seen to sack him that many Zenit fans are calling for across the country and particularly on social media?
I think to understand the true gravity of how disappointing this loss was, we must look at the backstory, because we were all live on air streaming, and we had Andrew Flint, we had David, we had a few other guys, and we watched the entire Club Brugge Zenit game. And when that second goal went in, the disappointment was just so palpable on the Skype call, because it was like, of course, this was before the Krasnodar game, this was before the Lokomotiv game, and everyone was sad again because it looked like it was going to be another season of excuses, another season of short-sighted football, another season of disappointment. And I do think that some of it has to be, not, I think more than some of it has to be, Semak must hold some accountability for that result, because don't get me wrong, I love Sergei Semak. I think the squad atmosphere under him has been better than it ever has been at Zenit, especially better than what it was under a lot of those foreign managers. I think he's done great things at the club when it comes to domestic football. But I think he gets his tactics wrong in Europe, and because it seems like he doesn't have a plan B. When hoofing the ball up to Zuba so he can bring it down for Azmoun doesn't work. He doesn't have anything. In the earlier part of his tenure at Zenit, he experimented with some 5-back formations, some 3-back formations, some other formations, but because of reasons like the foreign limit, because of the fact that Zenit's squad isn't as bloated or isn't as big as it used to be when in 2018-19 or 1920, he just hasn't experimented, and he relies on a 4-4-2, which clubs find it easy to exploit in Europe because they have a higher degree of they have quite a few technical players. They have pace. The Russian league isn't exactly renowned for pace, and it's just, and I think the players should say take some accountability as well, because that second goal, it was a classic case of a lapse of concentration. I think De Ketelaere found it way too easy to just tap in, and I don't think calls for Semak to be fired right now are warranted. I think that's very harsh. But I think if Zenit fail to win the league, and I think if they finish bottom in the Champions League again, I don't think. I think it'll be very hard for me to defend him, and I think it will probably be a fair result. I think if he loses his job.
Yeah, if that was the case, I agree entirely. I do want to say that at the start I did blame Semak, and I do stand. I think he made errors. The Bruges' threat comes down the wings. It's all pace. It's all counter, and everything was far too narrow. The 4-4-2 was almost a 4-3-1-2 at times. Krugovoy was isolated. Karavayev was isolated. The midfield themselves, they weren't mobile enough. They weren't tracking enough of the runners from deep. De Ketelaere was a runner from deep. Dennis was completely unmarked when he had 3 shots on goal. It was Drakitsky with 2 brilliant goal line clearances, and then the third one actually went in. Well, where were the men following these runners? So it's not just Semak. It was just a bad day overall for Zenit, and I'm glad you mentioned the foreigner limit, because once again, this foreigner limit is exactly what's limiting clubs in European competition. You've got some of the bigger clubs across Europe are able to stockpile first teams and second teams where they go out and they go on a Tuesday, Wednesday night and play some of the biggest stars in the world. And then they go on a Saturday and then they've got a whole second team that they can just go and win. Now, Zenit nearly have that, but because of this 8 squad foreigner limit, they don't have they can't get the quality in to really compete as you would expect. Hanu, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the foreigner limit is. I've been debating it with myself in my own mind, and I'm very torn because I think even though the foreigner limit is draconian and it does hinder Russian clubs, I think we have to perhaps blame more than the foreigner limit, because I actually had a look at all the clubs that played in the Champions League over the past 2 days, and not many of them had more than 8 foreigners in their starting 11. Obviously, this we know that clubs in Russia have very little room to maneuver because of the foreigner limit. You can only have 8 players, and those 8 players have to be your best players. Now, Zenit, I think, only played with 6 or 5 foreigners, so that does hold them back. But I think a lot of the times, because we see smaller clubs, we see clubs like Dynamo Kiev, and we see clubs that come from countries that have foreigner limits, that come from places that do not have as many foreigners in their teams, and they still manage to perform better. So I think even though the foreign limit is hindering and hampering the overall development of Russian clubs, I think in certain circumstances it cannot be blamed. And I think that Club Brugge game, even perhaps last Zenit's last UCL campaign, even CSKA's last Europa League campaign, I think those are exceptions. I don't think the limit can be blamed on that. And I'd like to think what you guys think of that as well. Even though we're straying off topic a bit, I would, because I'm still not sure on what I should think about it, honestly.
Yeah, well, whenever I think of the foreigner limits, my comparisons are always edging towards Shakhtar Donetsk and our neighboring Ukraine. Now, you mentioned Dynamo Kiev there. Dynamo have a foreigner limit, but Dynamo's is entirely self-imposed. They want a Ukrainian core by Ukrainians for Ukrainians, and that's because their fans are some of the most racist fans in the world. Let's not
Yeah,
get beat around the bush here. They are horrific, the White Legion, the way they go on and everything else. But they didn't want Luchescu in because he's
yeah.
Shakhtar Linz, because he's not Ukrainian. Now, Shakhtar, the opposite. Shakhtar have always had this Brazilian core. Their current teams, well, when I last checked, it was 44% Brazilian,
Hmm.
44% Ukrainian, and then the rest from wherever else. And it's always been like that. It's always been a strong Brazilian contingent, a strong Ukrainian contingent, and the way that Shakhtar work would actually be unworkable in Russia right now because of the amount of Brazilians they have, because it includes people who are in the second team as well, and they've got more than 8. They've got 12 in the entire squad, and Shakhtar have reached the have won the UEFA Youth League in the last 10 years, have won the UEFA Youth League, have been a finalist in the Super Cup, of course, because they won the Europa League in 2009, a semi-finalist again in 2016 in the Europa League, a semi-finalist again in 2020 in the Europa League, a quarter-finalist in the Champions League in 2011 and 12. So they've got a record of highly successful European campaigns, and a lot of that is built upon, of course, intelligent running of the club, of very intelligent financial works. I mean, the scouting they've got in Brazil is second to none. Some of the players that have brought through, I mean, Douglas Costa, Fernandinho, Willian, Alano, Jadson, Alex Teixeira, and all the way down to even some who are a little bit dodgy, like Luis Adriano, have still walked that league and did a very good job for them. So it's not just because foreigners, but you can't look past that. The most successful Eastern European club in modern European competition go towards this foreigner model, whereas all the rest of the leagues are trying to introduce these domestic-based models where it limits the amount of foreigners and legionnaires, and the league as a whole suffers as a result. That's my take on it. I mean, I do see why they brought the limit in. I can understand why. I just don't agree with it. And now, instead of trying to put plasters over the issue like naturalization, like the UAEU becoming Russian citizens, then instead of these little plasters of, oh, we don't have a good right back, right, make Mario Fernandez Russian. What about a backup keeper, right, we'll make Guillaume Russian. Oh, we need Neustadter, right, we'll make him Russian. Instead of doing that, just get rid of the limit. Then there's no issue. Then they don't have stockpiling players in certain positions. Then you don't have clubs who cannot compete at the highest level, even when they're on top form in a really good run. So it's just limiting the Russian game as a whole in the long and the short term.
That's fair, yeah.
Richard, I don't know do you want to come in here on Richard, on Semak and perhaps the foreign limit as a whole?
Yeah, I think with the foreign, I'll just quickly go on to the foreign limit. I think the ironic thing about all this is that the limit went up from 6 to 8. And I do find it quite funny that the top clubs, like I said in a pod a couple of weeks ago, they're a bit like Oliver Twist. They're going back to the federation. They're asking for more. I think the foreign limit should be lifted. I mean, I generally do believe that. I feel that, if it would help also spur on domestic players. I always say that, if you have a quota of some kind, it basically just players from that country can get complacent, because they know they're in the squad because they've got something there to protect them. So I think the foreign limit should be removed. However, what I will say is that I don't think the foreign limit has that much of an impact on Zenit against Bruges. I really don't. I think, like you were saying, James, I think this is on Semak. I really do think that that's the case. I thought the first half was so tepid from Zenit. It really was. And consider this as well. Bruges had one of the best defenders suspended, 3 or 4 other players unavailable due to positive COVID tests. And yet, Zenit played like the team in the first half, I thought, who were the side who had all the disruption pre-game. Admittedly, Zenit themselves had Malcolm and Douglas Santos unavailable. They were 2 pretty decent, pretty big misses, really. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I thought Zenit were just tepid in that first half. They didn't play well. It was cagey. It was slow. At least Bruges, even though they had their injuries, and I will credit Bruges. One thing I will say to Bruges is they played better than I expected them to do. And the young guy who scored at the end, forgot his name, escapes me, but he had a very good game in midfield. But yeah, Zenit, they just looked very, very tepid. I don't know what it was. They were, like Hanu said, I thought there was too much direct passing to Zuber, like almost just trying to use him just solely as a target man. And, he's a complete forward. You can get the ball to him and utilise him in other ways. It almost really took with Zenit when they went a goal down to finally start getting into the game and start playing. It seemed like that finally woke them up. It was like, oh, right, we're in a game here. Well, you can't underestimate Bruges. They're a decent side. Like I said, they on paper, Zenit should at home beat Bruges. But then you've got to remember, Bruges nearly beat Real Madrid last season in the group stage of the Champions League. So you can't take any opponent for granted. I thought, just really insipid in that first half. I wasn't impressed with it. And it took them to go a goal down before they started playing. And they had some chances, wasted them in the second half and paid the penalty for it. As for Semak, well, he's under pressure now. I mean, I won't go as far yet as sacking him, but there was definitely an explosion of rumours on Twitter, like flying. Well, not rumours, explosion of like discontent on Twitter after the game, wasn't there? And I mean, I've heard reports on Twitter before about people being a bit unhappy at the performance under Semak in some domestic games, like against Lokomotiv early in the season when they drew 0-0, when they lost against Dynamo. There was disappointment with the way Zenit played, like too defensive, too many long balls, this kind of thing. But there was a real outpour of discontent with Semak after the game, and I agree with you, it's definitely on him. And I won't go as far as saying get rid of him just yet, but he's definitely under pressure now. I think any kind of honeymoon period is over now, and the problem with Zenit with this loss is they've given themselves a real uphill task now, because Dortmund away is their next game, and if they lose that, then even third place in the group's looking unlikely. They're going to probably then have to beat Lazio at home, and then beat Bruges away, and then possibly even Dortmund at home to have any chance, and that's not easy. Really now, Zenit have kind of got to get something from all the remaining 5 games. They've no leeway now. They've no room margin for error, so he's under pressure. And if a second straight season without European football post Christmas, the only way then he could keep his job is by winning the league, and even that might not be enough. I mean, we've seen in the past how PSG have been ruthless with their managers. When Laurent Blanc won a domestic treble, quarterfinals of Champions League, and still was dismissed. Performance in Europe is important for Zenit's hierarchy, and I feel that he's under pressure now for sure.
Yeah, he certainly is under pressure. And even though we have all put our weight, at least in the short term, behind Semak, and we all have mentioned before that we think that it could be premature sacking. Now, to at least theorise and have a little bit of fun with it, Hanu, do you have any potential ideas on a replacement, or what any Zenit fans and the social media and so on have been suggesting?
I mean, Sam Allardyce is available, so I think that might be one that. But I mean, honestly, it's looking really bleak if they do decide to sack Semak, because it's fine if you sack Semak, but the thing is, are your replacements first viable, and second, are they going to be good enough? And there was a tweet, I basically asked people who would your replacement be for Semak, and there were people, in my opinion, hopeless optimists saying that they would try and get Allegri, they would try and get Pochettino, Valverde, Spalletti, and I just think there is an absolutely 0% chance of any of those coming. Maybe Spalletti
Yeah,
at a push,
absolutely.
but I don't think any of those other managers would try and come in. Anyway, if you go beyond that, you have names like Silvino, Jardim, Mark Hughes, Montella, Jurgen Klinsmann. You basically get to there's 6 or 7 very high level managers, and after that, it's just a bunch of mid table fodder managers. And I really don't think you would presume that Zenit look abroad is the thing, right? And if you're looking abroad, there isn't much that they have to choose from. I don't think a subpar or a bit of a high name, a bit of a famed manager, I don't think that's going to work given Russia's conditions. And I think inside Russia, I don't think there's many that can replace Semak. Maybe a club legend, maybe someone who's inexperienced, but again, that is also quite a precarious position to put yourself in, especially with Javier Ribalta possibly leaving. We know that Ribalta and Semak work well together, so I think those Semak's performances haven't been great at all in Europe, maybe now even in Russia. I think he's just too important of a cog in Zenit's hierarchy right now, and in that entire team for him to get sacked. I think if I was the Zenit president, I think I would, regardless of how this season goes, I think I would give Semak some time to improve as a manager. At least give him another 1.5 season, and then see where he takes from there. Because I think it's just too risky to sack him, or I think it's just too risky, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. I honestly, I seen the same. I saw the same tweets, and I thought this is so unrealistic. Like, this is not going to happen. There was some. I mean, like, I can say from a Spartak perspective, when Kononov lost his job, and everyone was looking around for who could be the replacement. Well, the the 2 Russians were Stani, who's not leaving Russia anytime soon, unless it's a disaster at the Euros, and then do you want that? Berdiev, who, God no, I don't want him in any of the top teams. Let's just end that there. And nobody else in Russia, as you mentioned, Hanu, is anywhere near as good as Semak. And those, like, you've got potential, like Anatoly Tomashuk, who's the current assistant coach at Zenit, very highly thought of within the club, been very successful as a player, very successful in the coaching staff. He could take over, but what's the point? He's one of Semak's best mates and has been. They were roommates together when they were both at Zenit 10 years ago. Now, what would be the point in doing that? If Zenit are going to get rid of Semak, it has to be for a big name European manager. And those who are available aren't going to Zenit unless it's for a ridiculous amount of money. And those who are available, well, what's the point? They're not as good. So it's that case of, well, if he is doing so badly, then look who can replace, and there's nobody. Richard, what's your thoughts on a potential replacement?
Yeah, I feel one name I think you could possibly throw. I mean, we're all hypothetical. I do hope he turns this around, and we're dealing in the hypotheticals now, and there's still a long way in the season to go yet. And if he wins the league, then I think he probably will keep his job for another year at least, regardless of Champions League results. However, I think one name to throw in the hat is, if they did decide to do it, is the young coach at Granada, Martinez. I've been very impressed with him, the way he has been performing with such a small budgeted team in La Liga. He's got them playing well, scoring goals. I think that's what they'd have to do. I say some of the names being banded around, like Pochettino and Allegri, are just plain silly. They're not going to come to Zenit. Pochettino could get a job at any of England's top 5 or 6 if they got rid of their manager. Could get the Man United job, for example. PSG job might become available soon. So I think those suggestions are just way off the mark. But if they were to get rid of Semak, I think they'd probably have to go with a youngish, coach from abroad who's been impressive in a mid-table top 5 club a mid-table top 5 league club. I think like Martinez at Granada, I think would be a decent shout. Maybe even take a copy from Shakhtar's book and possibly look for Portugal for coaches. They went and got Paulo Fonseca, and then he went to Roma, and and Luis Castro looks quite a promising young coach now that they've got there, who orchestrated that win against Real Madrid on Wednesday night. Sorry, Hanu. But yeah, it's. I think that's the model that they'd have to probably try and follow if that's what they were going to do, and that Martinez would fit the bill for that. But I mean, I'm hopeful he will learn, Semak, and turn this around. I mean, I don't think his job's massively under threat just yet, but he's under pressure. But if it did come to the worst, I think if worse come to worse, I think that's what Zenit would do. Like someone like Martinez, someone like that, a young up and coming coach with some potential, possibly look like copied Spartak and Dynamo's model and go to Germany, maybe even something like that. But I don't think Pochettino or Allegri are realistic. They're just not going to come to Zenit.
Yeah, I echo those thoughts entirely. And I think that'll do for the Zenit part of this, or the Zenit and Europe part anyway. And to finish off just quickly, we've got more RPL action over the weekend, and we had some more last weekend after the return from the international break. So I'm going to just do some quick kicks on each of the games. So we'll start off with Spartak versus Khimki, and Spartak won that game 3-2 after actually being behind at one point and performing pretty woefully. Of course, you could put your bet your house on it that Riazan Mirzov would have scored the opening goal against Spartak, and he duly went and done so. And to be fair to him, he had a better game than I've seen him have at all in a Spartak shirt. But it's one of those awkward and difficult results where it's all about just getting the 3 points on the board. And a year ago, they would have absolutely crumbled in that match. They would not have got anything from that game. You just know for a fact that, but as soon as Mirzov scored, the heads would have dropped and they would have lost, went on to lose probably quite convincingly, just as they did towards the back end of last season, quite a few occasions. But the mentality that Tedesco has got the team in right now is pretty strong, and they turned it around. Goals from a penalty from Kokorin, and then a pair of goals from Ezekiel Ponce and Jordan Larson, all 3 strikers scoring. Can't be much happier than that. Young lads playing. Stepan Oganyasan made his full team debut. Dmitry Markitisov got minutes again. And then those two with more youngsters like young Mironov all featured midweek in a cup defeat to Yense, which is embarrassing and a bit crap, but they were already through the next round anyway, so didn't really matter at the end of the days. Richard, you caught up with the CSKA Dynamo in the friendly derby, as it's known as. How did that game go?
Still a derby, though, isn't it? Still pretty fierce rivalry still, I guess. But no, yeah. Any Moscow derby is. It's always quite intense battle. No, I think CSKA deserved to win the game. I feel that they were the better side of the two, and it was starting to come together nicely. They obviously play in the Europa League, and in 10 minutes' time, they kick off against Wolfsberger from Austria, and they went into that, and they've gone into that game on the back of a good result. I thought they had a good game. Konstantin Kuchayev, I thought, played well again. They're starting to settle now, I think, CSKA, after an iffy 2019-20 season where, they probably could have done better, and there was question marks about Goncharenko. There's probably one or two, but they're coming together now, CSKA, I think, and there's a good performance from them. Dynamo, I think, are still just waiting, obviously, for Sandro Schwartz to arrive in Moscow. I think when he arrives and takes up his role as Dynamo manager, I think it's going to be this weekend, I think. Not for this weekend's game, but I think he arrives at the club this weekend and starts training next week, so I think, based on what I've heard. So fingers crossed. Hopefully he can then upgrade and improve the performances. But yeah, I kind of expected CSKA to win that game. Dynamo's still a bit of a work in progress. Needs to work on the defence because they were cut apart for CSKA's goals. But Nicola Moro got off the mark, and he's been improving recently for Dynamo. I think he had a bit of a slow start, but hopefully Schwartz can unlock his potential going forward. But yeah, good win for CSKA, and hopefully, fingers crossed tonight they can get a win for the league against Wolfsberger away. Wolfsberger's had a poor start actually in Austria, so it's a chance for CSKA, even though they're carrying a few injuries themselves. It's a chance, and they've gone into that game in a good frame of mind after beating Dynamo.
And Hanu, anything in particular on Zenit that's coming up soon with the game at the weekend, and then of course the Dortmund match next week?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very important week for Semak as well as the entire Zenit team. I think Rubin and Ruslutsky are a different animal. They have started to come into their own. They have a dynamic squad, a young squad with some goal scorers, with a lot of with last season they scored like 11 goals in 30 games. This season I think they've already surpassed that, so I think it's going to be a tricky game. That in lieu of the Dortmund game. Dortmund, of course, lost their first game to Lazio, and they'll be looking to bounce back. They have Erling Haaland, who on his day can score 7 goals. So, and Jadon Sancho and Thorgan Hazard and all of those guys. So I think it's going to be a very important week for Zenit is all.
And how do you think that Wendel played when he came on in the last game for Zenit? Do you think he could possibly get a look in to start against Dortmund?
I think he should start against Dortmund. I honestly think that Zenit need to play with a 3-man midfield and figure out a way to make it work, I guess. I know sacking off one of Zubau as Moon seems like an impossible thing to think of, but I think Semak sooner rather than later has to experiment. And I think either you replace Ozdoev or because Barrios is probably the most important player in that team along with Zuba, you can't replace him. But I think I would like to see Wendel start because he made a few good passes. He's not one of those players who just plays sideward passes and ends it off. And I think it would be nice to see him start, even if it's on the weekend against Ruben. It'd be nice.
Yeah, and definitely in Malcolm's absence, obviously with his injury, which did contribute to the defeat midweek. And I'll quickly jump in here with Arsenal Tula, who hosted Ural. Now, Arsenal have lined up in quite a new look, Arsenal really, with obviously Abdul Kadiri back from Dynamo Kiev. We mentioned that a couple of weeks ago how influential he's been, but up top they signed, of course, Kirill Panchenka from Tambov and Luka Djordjevic from Lokomotiv, and those two I thought provided quite a good bit of bite in Arsenal's team that they've been missing of late, with Yevgeny Lutsenko out injured, and with Lomavitsky on the wing, Kangwa, and then Kadiri and Kings Kangwa on the bench even, and Vladislav Panteleev pulling the strings from midfield. I think Arsenal are quietly have built one of the best teams in the bottom half of the RPL and really took Ural to the sword. Ural dominated the ball and didn't do anything with it whatsoever. They couldn't break Arsenal down. Arsenal took the lead through a good goal, but Ural they did actually score right at the end. A young lad who came on and had a very good game. His name escapes me. I apologise to him for that, but it was his. He had his league debut and he scored, but it was well offside and rightfully so. Correct decision, good decision. But I was very impressed with Arsenal and how the manager Sergei Popadli's turned it around a little bit, and they have got together what seems to be the core of what could be a solid lower mid-table squad. Richard, is there any games in particular that you're looking out for this weekend?
Yeah, I think to echo Hanu's thoughts there, I think that's a toughie for Zenit. They're coming off a poor result, and Rubin, Leonid Slutsky's starting to get a tune out of them now. They're playing well. I think some of their injuries, have subsided. They're back now, and I think that's going to be a tough game for Zenit. That's not going to be easy against Rubin. You back them to win, but because it's at home, but they've got to go into that Dortmund game in a good frame of mind, with a positive result. And Rubin are awkward opponents. At least what you could say with Lokomotiv is that they're at home against Rotor. So I think they're probably in seventh heaven with that, because what best way to prepare for Bayern Munich at home? It's going to be probably like I said earlier, parking the truck in front of goal, never mind the bus. So they've got Rotor, so you'd think 2-3 early goals in that game, get a couple of goals up by half time and then rest key players, because Rotor look like they're offering very little. So it's a nice little game for Loko there, to get themselves ready for Bayern Munich. Other games to look out for, I think Dynamo Sochi could be quite interesting. That battle of the teams just below the top 4 or 5. And then Akmat versus Ufa, I think, is going to be quite interesting, because Ufa, they really, really badly need a win. I mean, they need a point from that at minimum, really, because they're struggling like crazy. The window wasn't great for them, and I think since Gazizov left, they've looked a bit rudderless, really, as a club. And it could be a long season for them. If they lose badly against Akmat, I think they're in a real relegation scrap. So it's going to be an important match for them, that. But yeah, Spartak Krasnodar is the game of the week, and I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, of course, and everyone keep an eye on next week, because it is Krasnodar Spartak on Saturday and Ural Tambov down at the bottom of the table, which is a big game for Tambov, the most irrelevant team in Russian history. But of course, now that's the end of the Russian Football News podcast. Keep an eye on the site, RussianFootballNews.com, for some upcoming pieces, including a long look at Alexander Zhukov's annual State of Union football address, and then another one on an analysis from David Sanson on Kavisha Kvaratskhelia. Richard, what's your Twitter handle, and where can everyone find you online?
You can find me at RichDPike89, at RichDPike89 on Twitter.
And Hanu?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention this, right? My Twitter handle is at H4NUU. You can find it. I'm quite active on Russian football Twitter. That's fine. I don't care about that. But I do have a very interesting trivia fact that I want to humor you guys with before we end the podcast. Okay, so bear with me, right? So if you look at the top 100 most valuable Russian players on Transfer Market or whatever website you use, James, how many of those do you think play abroad? Top 100 most valuable Russian footballers outside of Russia. How many do you think play outside of Russia?
Is that current or of all
Current?
time?
Yeah, no, right now.
Oh God. Outside of Russia, knowing Russian players, I'd say it's single figures.
Okay, Richard, do you what's your guess? Richard, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Don't worry about it. Right. So it is actually just 4 players in the top 100. Right. And why this figure is insane is because there is not a single nation in the top 55 of the FIFA rankings that has such a low figure. The only one is Qatar, and there is only one nation in Europe which has a lower figure than that, and that is Malta, who are ranked 186 in the FIFA rankings.
My
Jesus.
God.
Didn't expect it to be
Therein
that bad
lies
to
the
do.
problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my
That
little
is the
piece.
issue. Dalek Azayev has obviously shipped around himself in the window for a move abroad, and then didn't go to Zenit, and then was linked to England, linked to Spain, linked to Germany, and then was even linked to the Championship in England at one point, and then linked back to Loko and ended up re-signing with Zenit. And a lot of the reason for that is because his father's his agent and didn't agree with him going abroad. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But that is quite a startling fact and startling figure. And on that bombshell, goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.